This week on the Merchants of Change, we talk with Billy Lynch. Billy was a college football coach for 17 years at Miami University, Indiana Bloomington, and Rice University before changing careers and becoming a salesman. For the past 4 years, Billy's been an enterprise account executive at Indeavor, where he sells their people operations platform to industrial companies. Here he is, Billy Lynch. I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes into being a professional technology salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change. What's up, kid? How we doing?
What's up, JR? Good, man. How are you?
Good. Billy, thank you so much for joining us today, buddy. We're pumped to talk to you.
Absolutely. Me too.
So Billy, most of the guests that we have on our podcasts are high-level athletes who've made a transition to sales. And as you and I have talked about, right, that's really why we started the company, was to help elite athletes become elite sales professionals. And one of my favorite parts about having started the company is I get to get connected with a lot of guys like you that made the transition before we ever started the company. So, and your story is just an awesome example. It's guys like you that kind of really inspire me to keep pushing and keep growing. So, I'd love to start with your athletic career. That's kind of where we like to start. So, we got a multi-sport athlete in college, football and basketball at Ball State. You must have been a pretty good athlete growing up. What are some of your fondest memories of playing sports, Billy?
Yeah, it's funny, and Tom and I, talked about this a little bit, but I'd say I wasn't very big, but I made up for it by being extremely slow. So I just kind of played those off of each other. But no, I would say, man, there's so many great memories, regardless of the sport. I would just say, when there was a ball involved and it was time to go play, from as early as I can remember, I just loved to do it. If there wasn't a ball involved or there was a weight room involved, I wanted no part of it. Told Tom that's why I played two sports, is so I didn't have to deal with an off season.
That's unreal.
That's legit. I actually heard Julius Peppers played basketball and football at UNC, and apparently he never was in the weight room. He was always in season. That's a legit thing. So, were you better at football or basketball? Which one do you like better?
So it's funny. I would say coming out of high school, I was better at football. I would say by the time my college career ended, I was probably a better basketball player. I think a lot of that, just had to do with, probably where my ceiling was, just genetically speaking. And, I guess I would say that was probably, I had a higher ceiling in basketball. And so that's, basketball for sure.
What position were you?
So I was a point guard in basketball. I played receiver in football. I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. I told Tom this. It's ironic that I ended up being a better basketball player because I was going to Ball State to play football. And you mentioned one of the fondest memories. So in Indiana, basketball is king, right? And going all the way back to the movie Hoosiers, forever it was a single class tournament. So, smallest schools against the biggest schools. Well, my senior year of high school, we actually played in the last single class state championship in 1997 in Indiana. And we were the smallest school to go through. So we were much bigger than the Hickory team in the movie Hoosiers, but they portrayed us, nationally as, the small school team playing in the last single class state championship. Well, point to that story is not only a fond memory, but my backcourt partner and one of my best friends was a junior. I was a senior, and he was really, really good. And so really they offered me a walk-on spot on the basketball team at Ball State strictly to get him the following year. And it worked out for Ball State and both of us because we became backcourt mates at Ball State for 4 years as well.
That's pretty cool.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I rode some coattails to get into my athletic career too. So that's okay.
All right, everyone, better to be lucky than good, but you better be good once you get lucky.
I'm curious to
write
know.
That one down. That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. Billy, if we were to gather like all your Ball State teammates around a fire pit and catching up on the old times, how do you think they describe the Billy Lynch of college days?
How would I hope they'd describe, or how would they really describe? Right? No, I think they would probably, say that I was very passionate, very enthusiastic about whatever it is we were doing. If we were, playing hoops, playing football, hanging out as friends, it was going to be enthusiastic and passionate. And I would hope they would say that I was, authentic and that I was a selfless teammate. But I know they'd say enthusiastic and passionate for sure. Hope they'd say the others.
Do you have a favorite teammate from all those different teams, high school, college?
Yeah, it's funny. And I'd say twofold. I mentioned my backcourt partner at Delta High School, where I went to school, as well as Ball State. He was one of my best friends growing up. So to have the opportunity to, play in high school and in college with him, certainly the memories formed and the bond there. And then on the football side, I had a teammate, and this is where, sports becomes so awesome, right? A teammate that could not have came from a different background than myself, that we ended up becoming. He was a corner, I was a receiver, that we became, really, really close friends to the point where Patrick Jackson, we called him Petey, my basketball teammate that I just mentioned, and Shakaro Martin, my football teammate, the three of us ended up being roommates. And Petey is in sales. He's a VP of sales for some pharmaceutical company, and doing really well. Chikaro, he's actually in Ethiopia, and he's working for the government. But I would say those were the two, closest throughout my career, and guys, that are still very close with today. I think you guys can all appreciate the type of guys that you may not only talk to, once every 6 months or once every 3 years, whatever it may be. But the moment you get on the phone, it's like it was yesterday, right? And I think that's, the beauty of sports and those bonds that are forged.
It really is wild how you can go forever without seeing an old teammate, and the second you're back together, it's like you didn't skip a beat. It's unreal. It's one of the best parts of that. So Billy, like you, I kind of grew up in a athletic family. My father was a coach forever. Your family, the Lynch family, has a rich history in sports and in coaching. Actually, in fact, both my brothers now are doing some coaching as well. I'm curious to know, like, when did you know that you were going to be a coach?
It was the family trade, right? So I don't think I ever thought about doing anything else. In fact, probably to a fault. Looking back, I guess I would have paid a little more attention in some of those economic classes or any of the others. I just knew what I was going to do, right? So it was like, all right, show up and do the work. But so honestly, the answer is, for as long as I could remember, that's just what I was going to do. Of course, I thought I was going to have a long NBA and NFL career first, but that didn't work out. So right into coaching.
That's did you have anything driving you into coaching, or is it just like after college you got into it through your family? And
yeah, I can just remember, the locker room as a kid growing up, right? And that was, we talk about technology on here, just holding the cords when you had to hold the cords on the sideline and being in the locker room and being around the guys and my dad and the guys he worked with. I was, had the passion to do it from the very beginning and just thought it was the absolute coolest thing in the world.
It's amazing. Would the players that played for you at Miami of Ohio and Indiana, Bloomington, and Rice, would they also describe you as enthusiastic and passionate, or would they have some other adjectives for you?
I think they would definitely say those two, and they'd probably take those adjectives to the next degree. They may even throw emotional in there, right? In fact, I'll never forget one of the greatest players I ever coached. At one point, like I said, I think the emotions of, coaching them very positively and coaching them as hard as I could on the positive, but, certainly on the correction side of the negative. I'll remember he dropped a pass one time and he said, "Coach, do you think I did it on purpose?" Because, I went crazy, bumming up. No, I guess not.
I always had a coach that always said, like, listen, you're going to make physical mistakes, but you're in control of the mental mistakes. And that's what you're really going to focus on controlling. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you miss most about coaching, Billy?
I would say that those relationships, right? And it's cliche. And I always say cliches are cliches because they're true, right? That's how they become cliches. But I do think it's the bonds formed in the locker room. I think a lot of times when you look back, it's those bonds formed, through the hard times or the negative memories you have, whether it be losses or seasons or whatever it may be, more so even than the positive ones, right? And, sure, you're going to talk about all the positive ones around that campfire, like you mentioned, but those bonds truly being formed of, having to stick together, having to, rely on one another to get through the tough times. Those are the age old, again, cliche, tough times don't last, tough people do. Well, those relationships last too.
100%.
So, Billy, bring me up to speed. 2017, 2016, you got a clipboard and a headset and you're patrolling the sidelines and, yelling at people for dropping passes and thinking about Salesforce.com and demand generation. How'd you get into software sales? The next year you're in sales. So what happened? Did you lose a big game or what, Yeah,
for sure. So I'll say this, and this will be a little long-winded, but we'll get to your point. I was very fortunate. I coached 17 years and only coached 3 places, right? Miami, Indiana, and Rice. And part of that was out of good fortune. Part of that was out of, a family decision. So that's why I say this can be a long-winded answer. So basically we went down to Rice University, in 2011, was our first season there and had a great experience. Staff, coaches, players, loved Houston, all of that. But I have 4 children. My oldest son, so my second child, has autism, and something for him is, when we got down there, he was, very severe, was nonverbal and had a lot of other things that he was really struggling with. Long story short, he started making huge progress and we were just very blessed, that God had brought us down to Houston. But another part of, that was he was, not only was he getting better and thriving, but change of routine or, familiarity was very important to him, right? So we had some opportunities because we had a couple really good years in there at Rice that if we were going to take the, proper next steps within coaching, we would have moved on and we decided to stay. Particularly had an opportunity in 2014 that I told my wife, okay, if we decide not to do this, we're putting all our buckets in Rice. And I was very fortunate that my boss I'd gotten a promotion every single year that I was there. And so we basically were like, let's take a run at this, coach. We're doing well and maybe we're the next head coach at Rice and we never have to move. Right. But as fate would have it, maybe because I was the one calling the plays, we struggled the last couple years there and our staff got let go. So my point is we had made the decision that we were going to stay. And basically, if it didn't work out at Rice, that we were going to get out of coaching. So it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. But now tying that into getting into sales, I mean, I'll tell you, I had no idea what we were going to do. And so, whether it was coach high school ball in Houston or, we talked about doing a lot of other things. But long story short, as God's plan would have it, my boss, our current CEO at Indeavor, was a good friend of my cousin's and had just become the CEO at Indeavor. And my cousin was like, hey, you should just talk to my buddy. I don't know what they got going on. Long story short, when I was the recruiting coordinator at Rice, everything was manually done by paper by way of recruiting. Phone calls, compliance, house visits, all that kind of stuff. And this company called Jump Forward automated the process, right? So you called through the app, it automatically logged the phone call, sent it straight to compliance. Same thing with your visits off campus, high schools, home visits, whatever it may be. Well, essentially that's what Indeavor does in the manufacturing environment for scheduling and absence management. So he started telling me this and I'm like, wow, I can get behind that. I saw what it did for me as an end user. And I think my explanation of my experience with Jump Forward kind of sold him on, my ability to sell Indeavor. So, again, the front end of that I know was a very long, answer to the question, but at the end of the day, it is just funny how it all came together.
Yeah, one of the reasons I started the company, Billy, is my story is very similar. I fell into sales by accident, right? And I think immediately loved it, right? And we just want to be an avenue where people don't have to fall into it by accident. Like they can go, they can do research, they can take some practice at bats to see if they like it. But I think no matter what, the adjustment's still hard. Can you talk a little bit about what were some of the hardest parts of getting adjusted to your new career in sales versus coaching?
Yeah, I'll say the biggest adjustment was probably for my wife and my family, because I went from being gone all the time to working from home. And so she had to quickly, remind me who was in control, right? And where my boundaries were as a husband, a father, and a worker from home. But and obviously we all on the call know how hard you got to work at it to be successful at anything you do. And so certainly, obviously selling technology is something you got to put your nose to the grindstone and get to work. But just time, home or with the family was much more than it was when I was coaching and gone, all the time. Right. But I would say the biggest adjustment is, I quite honestly went through a bit of an identity crisis and trying to figure out who I was from a confidence standpoint of, can I really do this? I put on the smile and faked it till I could make it, right? With others, but inside it was truly like, we talked about football was all I ever knew or ever even thought about doing. So now to do this and it's like anything else. Once you learn the acronyms, you mentioned Salesforce.com, right? Like they'd be like, hey, put that in FSDC. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? Or, hey, your OTEs. And it's like, what the heck is that? Like, once you learn the acronyms, you got a fighting chance, right? But anyway, so I think that was the biggest thing was just, validating to myself, that I could do it. Cause I was enjoying it. I was, enjoying the people I was talking to. It was just, you ask me to, talk about a third down package. I'd get on and talk to you like I'm talking now. Right. But all of a sudden you'd say, so what is your app doing? It's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm doing better than I thought, but you just, that was the biggest thing was just getting that confidence and validating that I could make the change.
That's huge. And then you can make the change. And a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches make the change and they kind of fall into it in a similar path. And I think once you establish that confidence, like you said, your old teammate's a VP of sales somewhere, or head of sales, like that is very common. So a lot of our listeners are athletes looking to transition and shift into sales. It'd be interesting to see and hear what kind of guidance you would give them from a player's perspective, but also from a former coach.
Yeah. So what I would say is, and I think all of us on this call would agree with it. right out the gates, they have a leg up on the competition. And I firmly believe that. And I believe it certainly in enterprise sales, particularly technology sales. But again, cliche guy, right? But the age old adage of, you don't rise to the occasion, you revert to the level of your training is so true. And what we have been trained to do without us even knowing it, gives, athletes getting into sales or coaches making the change, a huge leg up just on the ability to handle adversity. One thing we talked about is that next mentality, right? And just like you're going to lose as much as you win, and the ability to just say next and move on, or you're going to get hung up on a call and it's like, okay, next. That's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. And we innately have to deal with that on a daily basis, right? The old adage of, one play at a time is because, the play before was either good or bad and you got to move on. And that's sales, right? But most importantly, I would just say, time management skills, the ability to prioritize, a big part of sales is just routine, right? Well, we're forced into routines without even knowing it. But, at the end of the day, to be successful in anything, and I think it's very, very true in enterprise technology sales, is you have to prepare and you have to go about your job with relentless consistency. And that's what we learn as athletes, and that's what we preach as coaches, right? So that's, to me, the biggest separator.
Well said. Yeah, that the resilience piece cannot be understated, I don't think, Billy. Like, I don't think people quite realize how important that resilient muscle is, especially in your first 6 to 12 months of the role. Really well said. We've been fortunate to work with a lot of coaches. We've helped pro athletes, teachers, even military vets that played college football at some of the service academies. When they go through our training program, we're typically putting them in front of multiple different companies, multiple different opportunities. You obviously were fortunate. You knew the executive. You understood the value prop very quickly. What would your coaching be for someone that's evaluating multiple employers? Like, what do you think are some of the key characteristics that they should be looking for that first tech sales job?
Yeah. So I think personally, I've always been, certainly a big believer in goals and goal setting and everything else. And you talk about, long-term goals and short-term goals. What I like to say is, you have to have long-term vision with short-term focus, right? So long-term vision, short-term focus. I think, the biggest thing, if I was evaluating a company, and quite honestly, it's why I did dive straight into Indeavor, because I was so in line with the CEO's long-term vision, long-term vision, but his short-term focus of what we needed to do to get there, that I was all in. And I think if you look at that, across different companies to start, okay, what's the long-term vision for them? How do they see me? Now, what's the short-term focus of how I would be successful? To start. And then the second piece is, again, it's all about the people, right? So whether it's the culture or, just initial conversations and the relationships that you think, and then just trust your gut, right? If you're looking at it long-term with short-term focus, you're looking at the culture, you're looking at the people, then your gut's going to lead you the right way. No different than going through a recruiting process or choosing a job in coaching either.
So Billy, short-term focus, let's pick on that for a second. What did you focus on right out of the gates in sales that made you successful? And what did you struggle with?
Yeah. So great question. I would say, everybody's biggest strengths are their biggest weaknesses. So I joked about the acronyms earlier. Honest to God, I asked our marketing guy, and he was a great help to me. And then a member of our product team, I said, give me every acronym that I'll ever encounter.
No way.
And then I literally studied the acronyms. And I think that went back to my coaching, because we all run the same dang plays, right? We all run the same defenses, and one person calls it, cut, one person calls it zone, one person calls it belly, right? Like, it's all the same stuff. So it's like, okay, I know, and I had done different jobs where you had to learn new offenses, and it's like, oh, it's the same offense. They call it different stuff. So I knew if I could just get the acronyms down, then I could fake it till I can make it, right? Like, I could get on a call and be like, hey, what's your ERP system? Like, I don't know what ERP system is, but I can take notes on it, right? So anyway, that was the very first thing I did. And so quite honestly, once I did that, then it was just getting comfortable enough on a call to let them do the talking. As you can tell, I naturally overtalk anyway. And obviously a big part of sales, no different than recruiting, but is letting them talk. So I'd get the acronym down, and then I'd find myself out of nerves just talking. And I know I was like, what am I talking about? So I know they were the same thing. When I finally could just throw something out and let them talk, I got pretty good at it. It's like, duh,
Dude, that's so good. But I don't think we've ever had somebody say the acronyms thing, but there are so many acronyms. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, and it's the same stuff. It's SDR, BDC. Like, it's all the same.
Exactly.
We need to do like a vocabulary test, I think, as part of our training. You just gave me a good idea. And by the way, I love talking to football coaches because you guys are just walking one-liners. I'm taking these things down, like long-term vision, short-term focus. My favorite one you just said is, you don't rise to the occasion, you revert to the level of your training. I love that. Mm-hmm. So beyond the unbelievable one-liners, what other skills are showing up for you in sales that you developed during your coaching career, Billy?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, you mentioned resiliency or grit, but I would say, as I draw parallels to coaching, and more so than recruiting, because everyone always says, "Oh, sales is like recruiting." It's like, yes, it is. But we had a line, not to throw out another line, one liner on them, but it was in our. As you left our staff room at the office, and it said recruit them every day. And the point was not just high school kids, because everyone thinks like the whole de-recruit a guy, I'm going to love him up and then get him there and de-recruit him, one in the era of the transfer portal and everything else that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
But anyway, my point was I just think the ability to be we talked about preparation and relentless consistency, but the ability to continue to, stick with these sales cycles are ridiculously long, right? So to be consistent, I always said it's like the NCAA tournament. Like every call, every meeting you have is just survive in advance. Like get to the next meeting. Eventually you got to close it, right? But there's steps to get there. So I would just say, that mantra of just, relationships, building that relationship, and then, continuing to build the relationship as well as, the value proposition day after day, with relentless consistency, and basically outlast them, right? Get to the finish line through outlasting them.
That's one of my favorite one-liners. You just said it again, relentless consistency. I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
There you go.
So Billy, we talk about, mentorship a lot on the podcast. Yeah. It's huge in sales. It's huge in sports. Do you have any examples of peers or colleagues or other leaders you've had as mentors and what you've learned from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start internally and then go externally. I'm very fortunate. Like I said, our CEO, saw something in me and spent a lot of time with me. Typically new enterprise sales reps aren't getting from the CEO, of a company. And he was a great mentor. He, I think, obviously he had taken a chance on me. I think I may have been his first hire once he moved he had been president, moved over to CEO. So part of that was probably for self-preservation too, right? Like I took a chance on this coach. I better make sure he can do it. But he was great. And then, our current, SVP of growth, funny story in talking coaching. He actually, was a graduate assistant for us at Indiana. So he's younger than me. In fact, it's funny, he's my boss now, but he was a graduate assistant for us at Indiana, and then he was a coach at the University of Indianapolis with my brother for quite a few years, but got out way earlier than myself and went to worked his way up at Ford and was in mid-management there, then was a consultant at EY for a long time. So long story short, he was much more prepared but we recruited him over to Indeavor, and again, now he leads our growth efforts, and he's been an unbelievable mentor. He was one that I talked to a lot, before he joined the Indeavor team, just bouncing things off of, and because of his experience, not only in manufacturing, but in the consulting world. So that's been a lot of fun and been very helpful. And then I had a guy named Wright Moody, who's an older gentleman. He's a retired partner at Deloitte that was an old Rice University football player that was a big supporter of Rice University. And when I made the decision to get out, he really helped me with a lot of different things. And quite honestly, we talked about diving right into Indeavor. I did have, some other opportunities and some other avenues that Wright had set up for me. And anyway, just had a lot of really good conversations with him about, some of these different things. And then certainly just in life, mentors as far as, I don't think I had a single coach that didn't teach me something good, bad, or indifferent. Right. And my dad and brothers. And so anyway, a lot of different mentors. I'm very fortunate that way.
We, the coaches that we have placed, Billy, that are now working in tech sales, inevitably every single time I get a call or a text like a month in, and they're always like, dude, first of all, this is awesome. Second of all, this is a lot easier from a time commitment than what I was doing in coaching. Can you comment on that? Like, not to say the job's easier, but can you just talk about like coming from being, a big time college football coach at I was at Rice last week, unbelievable campus. But I mean, they run that organization like a professional organization. Can you talk about like the difference in that time commitment and just the level of effort between being a football coach versus what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I laugh about this all the time because we mentioned it. So my brother Joey is currently at Vanderbilt. My brother Kevin is currently at Ball State. And so this time of year, we may talk, on a Sunday night or whatever, what the film looked like yesterday, what's, opponent X look like this week, whatever it may be. And then typically don't talk again till Thursday. And so it's kind of a running joke every Thursday, whether it's football season or not, right? I say, hey, so what are you doing this weekend? Sunday, you guys want to go play golf or, whatever. And it's like, explicit, whatever. But I think that's the biggest thing is the weekends, right? Like you can work 20 hours a day, 5 days a week, but to know that you got your weekends for your family and your kids. I mean, I'm like literally the worst coach's pitch baseball coach, flag football parent. I mean, ever. Like I'm the worst, but I'm at all of it. Right. And, so I think that's the biggest thing. Cause like you said, it's a grind and you're going to work and there's going to be an email that comes through at, 9-10 p.m. on a Tuesday that you're going to address right then and there because that's your job. That's the deal, right? But I would just say the weekends and having a little more control of your schedule, like, hey, I'm going to block off from 11 to 12 to do this awesome podcast, right? Like, you can just do that.
100%. Can you talk a little bit, Billy, just in terms of like now you're settled into your gig? What are and I'm football coaches, right? It's all about structure. So can you talk a little bit about like how you're approaching your day-to-day job of selling software and like what the key cornerstones are for you that you build your day around now in this new profession?
Yeah. So we talked about it earlier, just, mentioned preparation and then do so with relentless consistency. So also, just routine is so big. I think for most people, whether they know it or not, right? But in our background in sports or The whole story of Nick Saban eats, oatmeal cream pie for every breakfast or every day for breakfast because it's one less decision he has to make, right? But like Sundays, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing Mondays, and it's like for the MAC coaches when you get into MACtion and you're playing every day of the week, and it's like, oh God, our routine. But Tuesday's a Friday, and you keep that routine. I think the same is true in sales, and we just mentioned having a little more opportunity to be fluid in your schedule, which is great, but can also be, it can be a negative as well, right? Like too much free time, no different than kid going from high school to college and you don't have not enough time, you have too much free time, right? So what I like to do is, hopefully you can edit all this too because I'm just all over the place, but what I like to do is I like to start my morning and block off 2 hours just to prepare for everything that is coming up that day, right? And I'd like to say, and I'll get into what I do at the end of my day, but I like to set up, 2 hours, typically from like 7 to 9 where I don't have anything, interrupted, and I force myself not to be responding to the things that happened the night before during that 2 hours. Now, if I do so beforehand, great. If not till after. But 2 hours, to do that. And then, typically go a couple hours where you're grinding through phone calls, emails, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. And typically I have, somewhere between 2 and 3 hours of meetings. So for us, certainly outbound sales is a huge part of what I'm doing, but there's an account management aspect too that typically, at least an hour a day I'm on with, current accounts, whether it's, talking current implementations or expansion opportunities or whatever it may be. And then, I like to take, an hour at the end of the day. And again, it doesn't always fall this way, right? Meetings get booked, but just from a time allotment perspective to kind of review, what had taken place today. You mentioned Salesforce.com. I mentioned our SVP of growth. I still am bad about, getting all my stuff in there, same day. So I try to block off that last hour, like, okay, what did I not get in so I don't get yelled at tomorrow because he's trying to forecast. So anyway, I try to finish the day with anything that I didn't get into, Salesforce.
I like that. I like the 2 hours at the beginning of the day. I think a lot of people, myself included, could find that part of the schedule going forward. Mm-hmm. So, Billy, we ask all our guests on the show about what skill they've developed that has made them elite. We ask everybody the same question. So what is your skill that makes you elite?
Man, I don't even know if this is a skill. And maybe more of an inherent trait, but I would say authenticity. I just think real is real, the old real, recognize real, right? Like, I just feel like, again, I don't know if it's a skill, but I would like to say what separates me is what you're getting. And I said this one time, and we all know this can almost come across as a slap in the face to someone in sales. And so obviously I'm in sales. I'm not slapping anyone in the face. But I always say, and I asked our boss this, you asked, about, young athletes coming out, vetting different, technology companies. I said, hey, do the people we serve need what we sell? And he said, yes. I said, do we do it better than our competitors? He said, yes. I said, well, then I'm not a salesperson. I'm a service provider. This is what we have. This is what it can do for you. Take it or leave it, right? Now, again, I know there's much, much more science to sales. And so that is not as a negative. But I try to go about my conversations that way, right? Like, this is who we are. We're passionate about what we do. We're a product by the people, for the people. And this is what you want it. Great. If not, what we talk about, that next mentality. So, hopefully when I talk to someone, regardless of persona, regardless of acronym, it's like, this guy may be an idiot, but he's a real idiot. You know what I mean? It's kind of,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Authenticity is great. It is a skill. It is a skill. is that people can, especially buyers, they can read right through people that aren't being authentic. Like I can, like if I go to buy something and I just feel it's a show, I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested. So you must do pretty well with that skill, I would imagine.
Well, I hope so.
I think I think what happens a lot when in your tech sales job is like it is a fairly complex concept to put your arms around. So we used to joke around, like people turn into like tech sales Sally all of a sudden, like their voice is very proper and they're talking like this, and I'm like, who the heck is that on the phone? You gotta find your voice as a salesperson. So we've never gotten that answer, but I could not agree more how important that is. The last question here, Billy. I mentioned my dad was a coach. You know, growing up, we always used to talk about how a lot of people play hockey, but not a lot of people are hockey players. And there's a difference, right? It's about having this like approach of professionalism to whatever you're doing, right? And you know, we think the highest praise that you can give a salesperson is calling them a pro. Like this guy, this girl is a pro. What does being a pro mean to you as a salesperson?
Yeah, so I hate to be redundant, and I think you hear the themes, but I would say this, like to me, the definition of leadership is three things. It's being authentic, it's being selfless, and it's being relentless. Right? If you're authentic, you're selfless, and you're relentless, then you got a shot to lead people. Right? I think being a pro at whatever you do, in sales, you know, being what we're discussing today, is the same thing. It is preparation for whatever you do, your sport, your job, whatever it is. It's preparation, being prepared, and then going and do what you prepared to do with relentless consistency. It's that simple. And so again, I know we've talked about it the whole podcast, so it's nothing earth shattering, but that's what I believe.
I love that. Very well said. Billy, this was an awesome conversation. I'm so excited to publish this thing and get it out there because we're talking to more and more coaches. And I think our candidates are going to learn so much from you, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I appreciate your guys' time. And I do. I think what you guys are doing is completely awesome. I know, JR, the first time we talked, I was like, I can't believe someone didn't think of that sooner. It's genius. And I just know so many, you know, kids or coaches will really benefit from it. So I think it's awesome what you guys are doing.
Billy, I benefit from this too. I mean, my word of the day is relentless, like relentless consistency. I learned from all our guests. So thank you very much. That was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Billy. This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.